Well, my name is Jo Ann Jansing, and I grew up in this very neighborhood, really. I went to St. George Elementary School, which is at 18th and Standard. We lived on Hill Street during my grade school days. Probably when I was a sophomore in high school, we moved to Kennedy Road, which is not too far away from here, walking distance, because after my dad died, I was in the community and I went back here to live because I could walk over to Mom's. So it's that close. So this is really my neighborhood. Up until when I was at Angela Mercy, I guess, all I knew were the Ursuline sisters. You know, when I was thinking about joining, I really fought that for a long time. I just knew, because my family had 3 nuns in it, and then Father Stiles was my cousin, and Father Jansing was my cousin, and, you know, all this, and I thought, oh, they're all expecting me to do this, and I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So I fought it for a long time, but I think it was when I was after my sophomore year in high school, and I dated that way because Janet Marie was 2 years ahead of me, and I know we went in the same car, the Catholic Students Mission Crusade. Well, that was really big when I was in high school, at least, and Janet Marie was really big into it. And they had a convention, and I think it was at Notre Dame. I'm pretty sure it was at Notre Dame. And we rode up in the same car to that convention. And I don't know, there was a priest who talked, and when I think back, even when things were clearer in my head, and I think back, I don't know what this guy said. But there was something that he said that made me think that I had to at least think about religious life. You know, it was kind of like he was challenging people to not throw it aside or whatever, you know. And so when I came back to UA for my junior year, my freshman, sophomore year at UA, we really had all very elderly sisters. And when the day was over, they were gone. They went back to their convent, you know. And that junior year, Sister Assumpta came, Sister Brendan came, Sister Nicholas came. I think they must have figured out that they needed to liven up the school or something. But they were really models for me. And, you know, I found myself talking to Assumpta periodically. And I finally just had to say to myself, I've just got to do this or I'll never know. I'll just have to go, and I'll just go. So I think because all I knew really well were the Ursulines, and I did see something in them that, you know, there was something inner coming out of their service that I noticed. I just decided on the Ursulines. And I remember really clearly thinking when I entered, I'm going to give this a shot because I'll never forgive myself if I didn't. And I will never make a decision when I'm down. I will have to be up when I'm making a decision. It was part of our vow of obedience to go where we were sent. And so I was, after my class stayed home after we had our novitiate. We stayed home 1 whole year to go to college. By that time, the Sister Formation Conference across the whole United States was saying, these sisters have been teaching for years and years without degrees. They have to get degrees. And so that's when all that started, which was back, that would have been 5960 was my first year after I took vows to stay at home. So I had 1 year when I first came to the community. That was what we called candidacy and postulancy. That was 1 year. I had 1 year. 2 years of novitiate, and during the novitiate, we took theology courses so they could count during, for a degree. And then we stayed home 1 year. So I had 2 full years and partial of a third, I guess you would say. And once we were out in the ministry, a bus would roll around the city on Saturdays and pick us up and take us out to the campus. And we went to school on Saturdays and in the summer to finish that degree. So I was here at I was obedienced here to St. Anne's first. So I was here 2 years, from 60 to 62. And Sister Rose was the principal and also the superior here at the house. Sister Pierre, who was later called Clara, was the 6th grade teacher. And they were the only 2 professed sisters in the house. Sister Clara Faringer and myself and Sister Regina Marie were the 3. We called them Juvenists then, but we were temporary vowed people who came here. So anyway, there's still a nation. Not just national, a world group of Ursulines that are all over the place that belong to that group that is centered in Rome. And then there are still some individual groups that chose not to move into the great big thing. I remember in the novitiate being told, she didn't tell me why, she didn't tell us why, but she told us that our group decided not to join the union. So up until Vatican II, we were not cloistered, but when we went out to the doctor or someplace, we always had to have a partner. We could never go out, and we wore a habit, and we wore a veil, and all of that changed with Vatican II. So Vatican II occurred, when I left here, I went to Angela Merici High School for 3 years, and it was during that time at Angela Merici that Vatican II was going on. So all of that change started happening then. We have a picture of my class standing on the steps. I guess it would be, I'm trying to remember what that building's called now on campus, but anyway, we're all standing on the campus with our full habit on, and we had this thing that went around our head like this, that was, it was the top of a flower box that we had to starch and then sew this white piece of thing on, and then it was around us like this, okay? And then we had what we called a gimp. It was big. And so we were all covered up except for this part of our hair. And that's how I was until the middle of my time at Angela Merici. So when I was here at St. Anne's, we were still in the full habit. Vatican II changed all of that because Vatican II took us back to the founding charism, what it was really founded for. We were supposed to find out, and it was really true all during my time at St. George Elementary School and at Ursuline Academy, and and even after I entered the community, we didn't really know that much about St. Angela. We really didn't. I mean, we knew she founded us, but we didn't know that much about her. I remember in school, we always, after we prayed, it was always St. Angela, watch over the days of our youth, St. Ursula, protect our future. We always said that, but it wasn't until Vatican II that we started studying and going back and finding out what Angela really intended and finding out who she was and, what her gift to the church was. And so that meant midway through my teaching at Angela Merici, we started taking off some of the habit. Some people still wore a veil. I think I still wore a veil until I went to graduate school. I think we went first of all into the little thing where part of our hair was showing. And so when I mentioned taking our picture up on my class, we did that, and then we went out and changed into the new habit and had the picture taken all over again. That's the time we took, that we went from the modified habit to lay clothes. And it was a choice. I think most people did it. There were still, a handful of people who didn't feel comfortable doing it, and so it was not forced on anybody. But while I was at Angela Mrissi and Vatican II was going on, we had a couple of priests who came over once a week in the evening to help us to understand what was going on at Vatican II. And I think at that time it became really significant to me that I was a lay person. Up until that time, we were just kind of stuck in the middle somewhere. It was it was the priest, it was the clerics, and it was the laity, but somehow the people thought we were a little bit in between there somewhere, but we didn't have a classification. And it became really clear to me during the Vatican II that we were laity. And so for me, that meant my place was in the pew. My place was not somewhere set aside. And that's when initially I didn't want to take off the habit. When I learned that, when that came very evident to me, then I had to take it off, because I felt like that separated me from the rest of the laity. So that was really my rationale for saying, yes, I'm going to take it off. Once we studied those Vatican documents, and that, whoever those priests were, I don't even remember. It would have been between 62 and 65, because that's when I was at Angela Mrissi. But the Vatican Council was going on at the time. Whoever these priests were, they were keeping up with it day by day by day by day and sharing it with us. And so we, once the documents came out, we really studied the documents. During the time period that would have been that I was at Fordham was from 65 to 69. During that time period, Ursuline College and Bellarmine College merged. Now, I understand that that was the initiation of the Archdiocese, that they wanted like one college or whatever. They could have 3 campuses, but they also wanted Spalding to get in on it too, but they did not. They chose not to. But during that time period, Bellarmine merged with Ursuline. So I came home in 70, so it probably was Christmas 69. I came home and I just automatically went over to Bellarmine, and the dean was not there at the time. I think that was Dean Preston. I can't remember who it was I saw, but the chairman of the chemistry department took me all around Bellarmine, showed me where my office would be, showed me where my research lab could be, and showed me the library, all kinds of stuff, and then took me to the office where I guess the person who was next to Dean Preston, and he assured me that the dean wasn't there, but that everything was okay. So I go back to Fordham after Christmas break, and I contact Sister Adelaide, who was the president then, and I said, well, it looks like everything is in order for me to go to Bellarmine when I finish, which would have been that following June. I get a telephone call from her, and she says, I'm afraid that what they told you is not accurate. She said, I'm on the board at Bellarmine, and Dean Preston has told me that they have no place open for a chemistry person. They thought I can't remember the name of the man because he really helped me later, who was the head of the chemistry department then, but they thought he just wanted it so badly that he thought what he was wanting was going to happen. But anyway, so I was told, Sister Adelaide told me I needed to start looking somewhere else. Now, that was really a blow for me, because when I entered the community, I was confident that I was going to be sent. I was going to be sent somewhere, and I would go and I would do what they, I would have a ministry at wherever it was they sent me. But telling me that I needed to look for a position was something that just blew me away. It really did. I went to this, I don't know where I guess I went to the library and found all these colleges. I was trying to look for places that were close to where we had sisters. I just sent these resumes out to all these places that were close by, and we had a sister who was in Washington at that time, so I thought, okay, I'll send one to Gallaudet. But anyway, that was really, Sister Angelise came to my rescue. John Ford, and he was a professor of philosophy. I had a philosophy course from him at our college, and when they merged with Bellarmine, he didn't go to Bellarmine. He was asked to he applied for and got the presidency at Mount St. Agnes College in Baltimore. And Sister Angelise arranged for me, and he got me on his staff. Sister Angelise had noticed that the Indiana University Southeast was looking for a person. She told me to apply, and I did. And I actually had I think that over that Christmas break, while I was at Mount St. Agnes College in Baltimore, I came home and I actually interviewed at Indiana University Southeast, and it looked like I was going to get it. So I go back, and I felt terrible going back because Dr. Ford had done such a wonderful thing in giving me a job that year, and he said, I told him what had happened, and he said, take it. He said, because I'm not going to be here very much longer either. He said, I'm doing the job here that was done in Louisville when they merged Ursuline and Bellarmine College. Mount St. Agnes College is going to be merging with Loyola College. And he said, what I want to make sure happens is that Mount St. Agnes College is not left behind like Ursuline College was when that merger took place, because that was a sub-merger. That wasn't a merger. And so he said, my job now is to get this merger taking place and to make sure that some of the people that are on the administration here get on the administration at the new place, etc., etc. So that was a breath of relief for me, because I didn't feel like I was letting him down, in doing what I did. So that's how I got to IU Southeast, was through Angelise, really, watching out for me, I guess. I guess I was there a year, I guess during my second year there, in the second semester of the second year there, is when we moved to New Albany. We were in Jeffersonville. Yeah. In one little old building that was the whole campus. And there were these, when they bring in and put up something that's temporary, that's where our offices were, and these little temporary things. I was really on the beginning, really, of IU Southeast. I mean, they'd only been in Jeff maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe, before this happened, and the chemistry department was, they had built up to the junior year. We had one more person to get, so I was there when the chemistry department, when we started offering a degree in chemistry, they kind of stuck me. There were 2 men who were on the chemistry department when I was hired. And I remember that when I came home that Christmas from Baltimore and had that interview, they took me to they didn't call it president until recently. Anyway, the man who was in charge, they took me to interview with him. And he was fine but he said, now sister, tell me, how will you get here? And I said, pardon me? He said, you're going to live in Louisville. How will you get here? I said, well, I suppose I'll have a car. It was just the thought of a nun, taking this position was okay with them, but they didn't know, and he said, and what would you want me to call you? And I said, well, as I've been taken around here today to visit some of the other, departments and all, I said, I noticed that you all are pretty much on a first name basis. So I said, I'm perfectly fine with being called Jo Ann. I'm perfectly fine. I said, the students will probably call me Dr. Jansing. But I said, if anybody wants to call me sister, they can, but that's not my role here. My role is to be the chemistry department person. So it was interesting that was interesting to start with. And I have to say, I didn't know why I was there myself in those early days. It wasn't at all what I thought I was going to be doing as an Ursuline sister. But somehow I ended up there, And it wasn't until I maybe 2-3 years being there that I realized that was a ministry too. And I think that's the other thing that has helped me so much, and that I've always told associates when they come in. We had one of our early associates had a husband who helped her take care of 2 or 3 women who lived with them and who were needy. And those early associates always looked up to us. If we had a prayer service, the sisters needed to do it. We needed to present it and so forth. And I kept trying to say to them, you need to do this yourselves. And that particular woman, I said to her, do you think of what she said, but you all are ministers. I said, do you think what you're doing at all in your home is not a ministry? She had no clue. She had no clue of thinking of it that way, And so there again, to me it was, okay, I'm a lay person just like you are. What I do is a ministry. If I'm a Catholic and a believer, what I do is a ministry. What you do is a ministry. And that grew over time. They're on their own. They're much more confident now to do their own prayer services and all that kind of thing, and invite us. It's a secular place, and I was not hired to minister to people per se as a real, on their sake. But what I discovered over time was when you teach in college, and I had big classes then, some of those introductory classes had 70 kids in them. And when you teach big classes like that, or any even smaller ones, you don't have the same contact with students as you do in high school. You see them if they come into your office with a question or whatever. But other than that, you don't have the contact. And so that bothered me in the sense that I had to know their names at least. And even though there were 70 in the class, I had to know their names. And the only way I could learn their names was I gave a little 15-point quiz every week. We had a bigger test, maybe after 6 weeks, but I had a little 15-point quiz. And when they would bring their papers up and put it down in front of me, I would connect it. And so, I knew their names, and at the end of the year on the evaluation, that always appeared. They couldn't believe that I knew their names. And I thought, how can you teach? How can you be a teacher and not know the names of your students? But it is pretty, I guess, that was something. But anyway, when they would come into my office sometimes in those early days, the first question would be, are you really a nun? And then we'd have to talk that through. But But I feel like I did, in some ways, I feel like I was able to minister to those kids more than I would have if I had been at Bellarmine, where they knew I was a nun right away, and, you know, it was just part of the game, you know. So I gradually got to the point where I realized what I keep trying to tell the associates is what you do, I guess you can make it just a job, but what you do, if you have the motive, is that's your ministry. It's the way you share yourself with the rest of the world. So it didn't take me very long at IUS. It's a great place. The faculty were all great, very accepting. I mean, I was chair of the division, chair of the chemistry department, and then we had divisions then rather than schools. It would have been a school now. I was chair of that. We used to go on these little retreats with the head of the place, you know, to talk about what was going to happen the next year and all. And I felt very accepted, and I didn't feel like I was set aside in any way. So it was a great place. We got a lot of students from U of L who came over. I can remember one of them really clearly, who came over when I was chair of our division, who came over to just look around. And when I sent him, I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I'll take you over to he was a chemistry person. I'll take you over and introduce you to," and of course the person who was doing the chemistry job at that time showed him all around, took him around, did all this stuff. When he came back to me, he said, "I'm coming over here." He said, "They don't even know my name at U of L." And he said, "Somebody here took their time to show me all around, introduce me to some of the students, and I talked to them, and he said, they don't even know my name at U of L." So we did, you know, IUS is a more student-centered, I think. It's not as big as U of L, so, I mean, that makes a big difference. It was a great place to work, and I think I discovered for myself what I kept trying to pass on to the associates, that what you do is, you know, what you do is ministry. It depends on why you're doing it, you know. There was a time period, and I can't give you the date anymore. There was a time period when we were having a fund drive. The community was having a fund drive, F-U-N-D drive. And they wanted I think it was Angelisa's term, but Martha Jacob can give you the dates, because I was asked if I would be a contact person with our former members. And so I put out this little newsletter called From Us, Ursuline Sisters, From Us to You. And it just was a little letting them know, you know, what we were doing, and asking them to send me information. And if they did, I would publish it so they would know what other people were doing who had been in the community for a while and so forth. And so I guess I did that for a couple years. And at one point, I began to get notices from some of the former members telling me that they really missed better contact, you know, that they would like to have more contact with us. And so a group of them, I called together a group of them who, I think I must have put it in there too, in that newsletter, asking if anybody was interested in that. A group of us got together. I know I was living at St. Vincent de Paul at the time, and a group of us got together, and it was really the start of the associate program. And it turned out afterwards that many of the people who actually originally came, because this didn't happen for a couple of years, were not the former members who started the thing actually, but they were people who had heard about it and came. And I think Clara Ferringer, I think, was the first director. I did not want to be the director because I was working on all this other stuff. But I think she was the first director, and I was living with her at the time in the formation community at the Mother House. And so Donna Ising is one of the first members. I think we started out with 4 people. 2 of them were former members and 2 of them were not. I remember we used to have, because Clara was living on the campus, and we would have like picnics and things in the summertime and invite them to come, and it just started growing. It just started growing, and that's how it really began. It began through that newsletter that was connecting with people out there who had once been a part of the community. And I remember specifically Paula Fangman saying to me, I finally became an associate because the newsletters would come out and you would have these things and the associates were invited, but the former members were never invited. So she said I had to become an associate in order to be invited to these things. When Sarah Stauble Teresa Butler was the first non-sister who headed up the associates, and Sarah Stauble was the one previous to her. And Michael Ann was in at that time, and Michael Ann, Sarah made her kind of they were kind of co-directors at the time. And then Michael Ann moved away and, is back again, but it's got a history to itself too. The whole going out and asking for money was a result of the fire. Yes, all of this was a result. It was an aftermath of the fire, okay? We needed money to rebuild, and so they started this fund drive, and they asked me to do this little newsletter to connect with the former members, and which is what I did. I'm sure in the archives there are probably all those little From Us to You newsletters are in there. It did begin with the fire, and then through the little newsletter, the interest came to have some way of connecting to the sisters that was, and so that's really, Clara Ferringer was the first one though. It took a couple years to get it all organized, and she was the first director. When I left IUS, I was elected to leadership. That was the first time. Jo Ann was the president. Judy Rice was vice president, I think, and then myself and Ann Mary. It was Sue. Sue was elected. She was deliberately elected because when her name came up, she had to get up and tell us whether she was going to move back to Louisville or not. And she said what she would do, and that's what she did the whole 5 years. She spent like 3 months with us and 3 months there, and 3 months with us and 3 months there. And I was always so amazed when she would come home. Her office was right across from mine. She would come in, the day she came back, she would come in and either take all this stuff home with her or what, but the next day she was ready. She was ready full force to do what we were doing. Now I did, when we had meetings, Mary Ann Huber took minutes for our meetings, and she was taught to make those very sketchy, and I understand why, because personal things were brought up. So I would sit down on the day that we had our meetings and send Sue a much more elaborate thing than the meeting so that she knew what other things had come up, that weren't in the minutes. So she did have, whether she looked at all that while she was down there. Knowing Sue, she probably did, though. She is amazing. So then that was that. And when I retired from that, when I got finished with that, I went to Shively Area Ministries. Jo Ann had already been working there, and I volunteered there, and they gave me a little part-time job there. I don't know how many hours a week it was, but I did that amongst, anything. That was not a full-time thing, but it was I guess it was something that went on my assignment paper every year until 2014 when I was elected again. And then following that, like it's what I just told you, following that, we were shut up with COVID. So I do now, I'm going back to Shively 1 day a week. It's 1 day a week, it's Monday, and they're not open on the first Monday, so it's really only like 3 times a week. But I spend most of my time looking in on people in our community that I know have needs, trying to let them know that I'm available, When we were in office the first time with Jo Ann, Jane Stuckenborg had just come out of office for the prior team, which Helen was also on, and she had been responsible for the funerals. And so when we came into office, she told Jo Ann that she would be happy to continue doing that if it would be helpful. Oh my God, helpful. So we didn't have to worry about anything. We had to attend, and we had to call people's homes and that kind of thing, but we didn't have to do any of the planning or anything. She took care of all of that. So when I came into office, the second time in 2020, that's part of my ministry now too, is that I'm the person that organizes and all that for the funerals. And we've tried to meet, as you know, to figure out who does what amongst the, each one is different. And so you have to kind of go with the flow. What did I see of Angela? I didn't know Angela then, but I think now that I saw the kind of person Angela was in each one of them, because what they were doing was flowing out of who they were. I made my final vows. There was one time, and this was when I was at Fordham. It was during that period when I was away at school, and I don't even remember what was going on in the community at the time. But for me, it was very disturbing because I wasn't here and I didn't know what was happening. I had different people telling me different things. And when I came home that summer, Sister Angelisa's mother had an apartment someplace up Lexington Road. And when she died, she willed that to the community. For a while, they kept it as someplace where you could go if you wanted to be away or something. So I decided I was going to make a private retreat. And I got all these tapes that Martha Buser had been using for her Angela retreats and stuff, and I took those up with me. And I can still remember coming back to campus and going to different churches for Mass, and what was blowing right in my eyes was that how people were getting older. I would go to Mass at the Mother House and see all these people coming back from communion and realizing how much older they were, and I would go to, and then I would go to a church and it would probably be one of the retired priests who was having Mass. And all this stuff that I didn't know what was happening. There was a time after Angelise went out of office when she was sort of, I think, blamed for the college thing. And, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I remember during that little private retreat going to the cemetery. And I just started out with Celicia's grave. And I went to every grave in that community, in that cemetery, asking them to pray for me. And when I got to the very end, I just stood there and bawled I mean, I just wept because I knew in my heart that that's where I belonged. You know, it was all that turmoil that was going on inside me was gone. But that's the only time I think I ever questioned, you know, the decision that I had made, and it all had to do because I just didn't know what was going on. When I came home that summer, I didn't know who to talk to because I knew, you know, there were sides. I remember now that it all had to do with Angelise and that merger, that it was because all that happened while I was away at school. After I made my retreat this last summer, I realized in my heart, what it meant, what it was meaning, you know. And I knew in my heart that the decisions that we made had to be made. They had to be made. But all of a sudden it was coming upon me, you know, that the mother house was no longer our mother house. And the freedom that we had that way, even though I think the schools have been wonderful partners. I mean, I don't know that they've ever refused anything that we've ever wanted to do, but COVID had something to do with that too. You know, we couldn't do things together that we had done together for so long, using the chapel and having the chapel now not being able to use for, you know, I realized how much that was really affecting me, and I told Jo Ann, you know, I really think at some point we probably need to do something about the grief that is in our hearts, even though we are confident. I'm confident as all get out that we did what we were asked to do by God. And we're going somewhere. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the future's going to be, but something's going to come out of all this. I'm confident about that, but I probably won't see it, you know. But I think we need to tend to that. I don't know how other people are feeling. I was part of a lot of those decisions that were made because I was on leadership twice, and we did some things during Jean Ann's term, and we deeded over part of that property during her term, and then during the term with Janet Marie, it was even, you know, it was final. The whole thing then went. I don't at all regret any of those decisions because I know what we did to get that far, and what time has done. You know, people are not coming to the community anymore. They're not going to very many communities anymore like us. Now, the ones that still have a habit on are still getting people. So I don't know whether there's a longing for that symbol or what, but anyway, you don't stop being a human being when you make hard decisions. I'll tell you what I miss besides the chapel. I miss the library so bad. God, I wish we had the library. Because, you know, what we had to do with that last funeral that we had to do upstairs in that room, it was okay. It had to be. But there was an atmosphere that was missing. The library just had more of a space for people from families and outsiders to come in for visitation and all that kind of thing. It was just, there was something down there. There was an atmosphere down there. We could put more chairs in there, you know, so that people who came for the visitation could stay. I mean, if they came just for visitation, they could stay for the prayer service if it was happening after it. But we just didn't have space really to do much. We had to cut that really short when we did it in the Heritage Room because there just wasn't any space for it. And so many of the things, so many of the gatherings we had in the library for some reason. It just seems like that library and the chapel were the two things that, you know, are the most missed. This is my third time living in this house. I was here from 60 to 62 when I taught here. And then after my dad died in 83, like I said, I could walk from here to, I remember asking if I could move here. And they had room, so I came. That first group was Rita Joseph and Marita and myself. I think it was only the three of us, really. Loretta Kraske finally moved in here because she was teaching at one of the other schools that was close by, so she lived here. And during that time, they had a fire. I think it was John Vianney that she was teaching at the time. And they had a fire in their school. And they didn't know what they were going to do. And this building was empty. So we had their school over here. Loretta was able to tell them, you know, and to see, and the pastor here was fine. So we had them here for a year. And anyway, somehow I lived on Lydia Street. But when I came back here, Paula was here. And then when we were elected, both elected, she said we shouldn't live in the same house, and so she moved. So I've been here for probably 10 or 12 years now, this last time. I never taught at Sacred Heart, so when I came into office, all of a sudden I was on the board for the Sacred Heart schools, and, you know, and I had to, what I started to tell you while I was living here, Janet Marie called me because I think she was maybe our director of education or something at the time. And she asked me if I would be on the board for the schools. And I said, yeah. Why? Well, she said, you know, she and I both went to UA, so none of us, she had the same background I did, except she lived in a different part of town. She thought it would be good for me to know what's going on there. So I was on the board for a while, and without being in leadership, just a short time. But that board was pretty bad at that time. The lady who was the chair of the board was getting a committee together to work on the uniforms of the students. And I thought, they don't know what a board is. Jean Ann, I think, is the one that they finally, when Jean Ann became, I think Jean Ann was the first. She took the chairmanship long enough to call in people to show them what a board was supposed to actually be doing. Jean Ann's the one that got them straightened out in terms of what they should be doing. It was being on the board after it learned how to be a board that I always wanted to be on that committee that visited the schools. That's the committee I wanted to be on. And it was, you know, when I saw what was going on in the schools and all, I had the, you know, I went to UA and Rudy Toot Toot, Rudy Toot Toot, they're the girls from the Institute. They were the, you know, Sacred Heart was just another world. And then I never taught at Sacred Heart, so then I had to really learn what was going on at the Sacred Heart schools. UA stopped somewhere around 72 or 73. I think Barb Burr was in one of the last classes at UA. Angela Marissi had not come into existence yet at that time. And so, I mean, I went to UA, I taught at Angela Marissi. I never had anything to do with Sacred Heart until I got into leadership. And then I had to learn, and that's when I came to appreciate what was going on in the schools. They're really good. I mean, I loved visiting all those schools to see what's going on there, and I'm glad for what's going on. And this new team, after Amy left, I told her, I said I was in contact with her a little bit. Amy really didn't ask us to favor one thing or another, you know, but I had been in connection with Nativity from the day it was started, because it started during Jean Ann's first term. So I was on the board all those years, for those 6 years. And then I was off for 6 years, and then I went back on the board again for Janet's term. So I had a history with Nativity. I was on the board, or I was in office when we chose to found Nativity. And of course, Paula was I think Sister Sarah's team, which was prior to ours, is the one that Paula went to, and that they gave her okay. But it was Jean Ann's term then that when it first started, actually. School actually was founded during that term. So my heart was in Nativity. So when Amy was leaving Sacred Heart Schools, I told her, I said, I'm just praying for you that you make the decision that is best for you. And she said, I know. She said, I love where I am, but somehow I just feel drawn to that. And so she's going to be fantastic, and it's going to flourish. But they left behind, and when I saw her the last time, I said, the best thing that happened after you left was that they had to figure out what to do in your absence. And I said, they've got something in place now that's permanent. That team of people are doing what Amy did when she was there, and they're part of the administration. So I feel really good about what she was able to do while she was there. It's going to get carried on because, they've put it into the structure now. Because I don't think they're going to have another, whatever her role was. So the character of the schools, I think, will be preserved. Amy did a phenomenal job.